Victorio and Delche distrusted the white intruders and gave them a wide berth. Nana, in his 50s but tough as rawhide, considered the English-speaking white men no different from the Spanish-speaking Mexicans he had been fighting all his life. Geronimo, in his 20s, had not yet proved himself. The Navajos were related to the Apaches, but most Navajos had taken the Spanish white man's road and were raising sheep and goats, cultivating grain and fruit. As stockmen and weavers, some bands of the tribe had grown wealthy. Other Navajos continued as nomads, raiding their old enemies the Pueblos, the white settlers, or prosperous members of their own tribe. Manuelito, a stalwart, mustachioed stock raiser, was head chief, chosen by an election of the Navajos held in 1855. In 1859, when a few wild Navajos raided United States citizens in their territory, the U.S. Army retaliated not by hunting down the culprits, but by destroying the hogans and shooting all the livestock belonging to Manuelito and members of his band. By 1860, Manuelito and some Navajo followers were engaged in an undeclared war with the United States in northern New Mexico and Arizona. In the Rockies north of the Apache and Navajo country were the Utes, an aggressive mountain tribe inclined to raid their most peaceful neighbors to the south. Ouray, their best-known leader, favored peace with white men, even to the point of soldiering with them as mercenaries against other Indian tribes. In the far west, most of the tribes were too small, too divided, or too weak to offer much resistance. The Modocs of northern California and southern Oregon, numbering less than 1,000, fought guerrilla fashion for their lands. Kintquash, called Captain Jack by the California settlers, was only a young man in 1860. His ordeal as a leader would come a dozen years later. Northwest of the Modocs, the Nez Perce had been living in peace with white men since Lewis and Clark passed through their territory in 1805. In 1855, one branch of tribes ceded Nez Perce lands to the United States for settlement and agreed to live within the confines of a large reservation. Other bands of the tribe continued to roam between the Blue Mountains of Oregon and the Bitter Roots of Idaho. Because of the vastness of the Northwest country, the Nez Perce believed there would always be land enough for both white men and Indians to use as each saw fit. Hindmont Tuyalakhet, later known as Chief Joseph, would have to make a fateful decision in 1877 between peace and war. In 1860, he was 20 years old, the son of a chief. In the Nevada country of the Paiutes, a future messiah named Wovoka, who later would have a brief but powerful influence upon the Indians of the West, was only 4 years old in 1860. During the following 30 years, these leaders and many more would enter into history and legend. Their names would become as well known as those of the white men who tried to destroy them. Most of them, young and old, would be driven into the ground long before the symbolic end of Indian freedom came at Wounded Knee in December 1890. Now, a century later, in an age without heroes, they are perhaps the most heroic of all Americans.